The rain had been falling for hours, a steady, relentless patter against the windows of Daniel Hawthorne's small stone cottage on the edge of the Yorkshire moors. The night was the kind that made even the foxes retreat to their dens damp, wind-lashed and full of shadows that moved in ways shadows shouldn't. Daniel sat in his armchair, the fire casting an amber glow across the worn wooden floorboards, a book lying forgotten in his lap. Solitude had been his chosen companion for the past 5 years, ever since he'd left the bustling streets of Leeds for the quiet comfort of the countryside. Life was simple here, predictable, safe, at least it had been until the knock came suddenly, sharp against the door, cutting through the hiss of the rain. Not a neighborly tap, not the impatient rap of a delivery driver, but something urgent, desperate. Daniel's brow furrowed. Nobody came to his door at midnight. Another knock followed, louder, quicker this time, then a voice muffled by, "The storm, please, please, open the door." The sound of it made him pause, a woman's voice, shaken, breathless, threaded with something that was almost panicked. Cautiously, Daniel rose, crossing the room. He didn't keep a gun like some of the farmers nearby, but his hand hovered over the heavy brass poker by the hearth. In the city he'd learned the hard way that not everyone who begged for help deserved it. But when he opened the door, a sight before him drove the thought clean from his mind. She stood there drenched, hair plastered to her face, a thin cardigan clinging to her shoulders like a second skin. Her skirt was torn at the hem, and her hands trembled as if she'd been running for miles. Her lips were pale, her eyes wide and glistening, not with rain, but with fear. "Please," she said again, her voice cracking. "I have anywhere else to go." The wind rushed in, bringing with it the scent of wet earth and the faintest trace of something else, smoke, maybe, or something burning far away. Daniel's instincts tugged at him. Whoever she wasn't here by accident. For a moment they just stared at each other. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, and he saw her glance over her shoulder into the darkness beyond the cottage gate. "You'd better come in," he said finally, stepping aside. She hesitated, as if crossing the threshold was another kind of risk, then slipped inside, the door closing behind her with a soft thud. The firelight painted her features in golden shadow. Up close, she was younger than he'd thought, maybe late 20s, but there was a weariness about her, the kind that didn't come from age but from carrying too much for too long. "You're soaked through," Daniel said, moving toward the hearth. "Sit, I'll get you something warm." She obeyed silently, lowering herself into the armchair opposite his. Steam began to rise from her clothes in the fire's heat, but she kept glancing at the window, her hands knotted tightly in her lap. "What's your name?" he asked, filling the kettle. "Clara," she murmured, barely looking at him. "And where are you coming from at this hour?" "Clara." Her eyes flicked up to his, holding them for a second, long enough for him to see the unspoken answer she wasn't ready to give. Then she shook her head. "It's complicated." Complicated. That word, Daniel thought, was just a polite way of saying dangerous. Outside, a gust rattled the panes, and somewhere in the distance a low rumble of an engine passed on the lane. Her shoulders tensed at the sound. Daniel set 2 mugs of tea on the table and sat opposite her. He didn't press her, not yet, but in the flicker of the firelight he could see the truth in her eyes. Clara wasn't just lost, she was running, and whatever she was running from might not be far behind. The kettle's whistle had faded, but the warmth of the tea seemed to do little for Clara. She cradled the mug in both hands, sipping only once before setting it down untouched. Daniel noticed the faint tremor in her fingers, though whether from cold or fear, he couldn't yet tell. She sat stiffly, her back not quite touching the chair, like someone ready to spring up at a moment's notice. Her gaze kept drifting to the door, then to the window, as if she was measuring the distance between herself and the outside world. "You're safe here," Daniel said, his voice steady, though part of him knew he couldn't yet promise such a thing. "No one comes up this lane without me knowing." Clara gave the smallest nod, but her lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't believe him. Not entirely. "Are you from around here?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. "No." Her answer came quick, almost too quick. "I was just passing through." Daniel studied her for a moment. Passing through the Yorkshire moors in the middle of a storm, on foot, with no coat. The story didn't hold, but he let it slide for now. She noticed him watching her, and shifted under his gaze. "I don't mean to trouble you. I can leave as soon as it's light." He shook his head. "In this weather, you'd be walking into a death trap. You'll stay the night at least." A flicker of something crossed her face, relief, quickly masked by caution. "You're very kind, Mr. Hawthorne." "Daniel Hawthorne." She gave a faint smile. "Thank you, Mr. Hawthorne." Something about the way she said his name, careful, almost testing it, made him curious. She didn't seem like the type to wander aimlessly into a stranger's home, and yet here she was. From outside, the wind howled again, rattling the chimney, but beneath it, Daniel caught another sound, faint, distant, almost swallowed by the storm. A vehicle, perhaps, moving slowly along the lane. His jaw tightened. Clara heard it too, her head turned sharply toward the sound, her eyes wide and unblinking. She didn't speak, but her body told him everything. Whoever was in that vehicle, she knew them. Daniel stood, moving to the window without a word. He pulled the curtain back just enough to peer into the rain-smeared darkness. Nothing yet, only the faint glow of headlights far down the road, weaving slowly toward the cottage. "Expecting someone?" he asked, his voice low. Clara shook her head, but her fingers clutched the arm of the chair so tightly her knuckles whitened. Daniel let the curtain fall back into place. "You need to tell me. Clara is someone looking for you." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. Then, with a glance toward the door, she whispered, "Not someone, more than one." The kettle on the stove began to hum again from the heat of the fire, but neither of them moved. Outside, the headlights drew closer, the shape of a black car emerging through the rain. Daniel's instincts screamed at him. The quiet life he'd built was about to be shattered. Clara's voice broke the silence. "If they find me here, they won't leave you alive." The black car rolled to a slow, deliberate stop just beyond the gate. Its headlights cut through the rain, casting long, ghostly shadows across the front of Daniel's cottage. The engine didn't turn off, it just idled there, a low, steady growl in the night. Daniel felt the hair on the back of his neck rise. Whoever these men were, they weren't lost, and they weren't in a hurry. He glanced at Clara. She sat frozen, her tea untouched, her eyes locked on the window like prey watching the edge of the forest. In the firelight, her face had gone pale. "Stay here," Daniel said quietly. Clara's hand shot out, gripping his sleeve. "Please, don't open the door. I need to see what they want." Her grip tightened. "They don't want to talk." The words settled heavily between them. Still, Daniel moved toward the door. Years on the moors had taught him something about reading people, and everything in his gut told him this visit had nothing to do with neighborly courtesy. A slow knock came 3 times, each one firm, echoing through the small hallway. Not polite, not impatient, just certain. The sound of someone who expected the door to open. Daniel didn't open it. Instead, he called through. "Evening, something I can do for you." A pause, then a voice, low, male, and unnervingly calm. "We're looking for a woman. Passed through here about an hour ago. Dark hair, thin. You wouldn't have seen her, would you?" Daniel's eyes flicked toward Clara. She was shaking her head frantically, mouthing the word no. "Can't say I have," Daniel replied. "Storms kept me indoors all evening." The voice didn't answer right away. "Then mind if we take a look around? Just to be sure." Daniel's jaw clenched. "I do mind." Silence followed, broken only by the rain hammering the roof. When the voice came again, it was harder. "You sure you want to do that, friend?" Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he stepped back from the door, his hand brushing the heavy iron poker by the hearth. Outside, the engine revved. The car didn't drive away, it inched forward, its tires crunching over the gravel. Circling around the side of the house, Daniel moved to the back window just in time to see 2 shadowy figures step out, their coats flaring in the wind. One of them carried something long and glinting, not a walking stick. Clara rose from her chair, her voice trembling. "They'll force their way in." Daniel turned to her. "Then we'd better make sure they regret it." She stared at him, as though seeing him properly for the first time, not just a quiet man in a stone cottage, but someone who might actually stand between her and whatever nightmare was outside. And in that moment, as the first shadow passed the kitchen window, Daniel realized he wasn't just protecting a stranger anymore. He was protecting someone fate had placed in his path for reasons he didn't yet understand. The rain had thickened, rattling the roof like handfuls of pebbles thrown by an angry hand. Daniel could hear the crunch of boots on wet gravel, deliberate and slow, moving toward the rear of the cottage. He motioned for Clara to step back, his palm flat and firm, the kind of gesture that spoke without words. She obeyed, her bare feet barely making a sound on the worn wooden floor. Then came the first jolt, the sharp, hollow thud of something striking the back door. Once, twice, each blow stronger than the last. The cottage shuddered, its old timber frame protesting with a deep creak. Daniel knew the door wouldn't hold forever. It was sturdy oak, yes, but age had thinned the bolts, and the hinges had seen better years. He grabbed the iron poker from beside the hearth, its weight reassuring in his hand. He had no illusions. It wasn't much against whatever the glinting object had been outside, but it was something. Clara whispered from across the room. "They're not going to leave." Her voice was thin, almost childlike. "No," Daniel said quietly, his eyes fixed on the back hall. "They're not." The third strike was the loudest yet, sending a shower of splinters across the flagstone floor. The sound echoed unnaturally in the small space, a brutal reminder of how close danger had come. "Upstairs," Daniel ordered. Clara hesitated, her gaze locked on him as if moving would mean leaving the only shred of safety she had. "Now," he repeated, sharper this time. She disappeared up the narrow staircase, her hand sliding along the worn banister. Daniel waited until he heard the faint creak of the bedroom floor above before stepping toward the kitchen. Another blow, and the latch gave way. The back door slammed inward, banging against the wall hard enough to rattle the crockery on the shelves. 2 men entered, ducking slightly to clear the low frame. Rainwater dripped from their coats, pooling dark on the floor. One was broad-shouldered with a shaved head and eyes that didn't blink often enough. The other was leaner, but the way he gripped the length of steel pipe in his hand made him just as dangerous. Daniel stood in the center of the room, poker in hand, his stance solid. "You've made a mistake," he said, his voice calm but carrying an edge. Shaved head smiled, a cold, humorless curve of the mouth. "We'll see about that." The lean one stepped sideways, glancing toward the stairwell. "She's here, isn't she?" Daniel moved slightly to block his line of sight. "No one here but me, and you're trespassing." They didn't answer with words this time. Shaved head lunged first, fast for a man his size. Daniel sidestepped, swinging the poker in a short, sharp arc. It connected with the man's forearm, producing a grunt and the clatter of something metallic hitting the floor. The lean one came next, jabbing forward with the pipe. Daniel caught the movement, deflecting it with the poker, the impact sending a jarring vibration up his arm. From upstairs came the sound of a door opening. Clara's voice, tense but loud. "Leave him alone." The distraction was enough. Daniel rammed his shoulder into the lean man's chest, driving him back against the kitchen table, which groaned under the sudden weight. But Shaved Head was already recovering, stepping forward. Again, his face twisted with anger. It was then that Clara appeared at the top of the stairs, not empty-handed but holding the heavy double-barreled shotgun Daniel kept locked in the old cabinet. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were steady. "Get out," she said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise like a blade. Both men froze. Rainwater dripped in the silence, the only sound, until Shaved Head chuckled under his breath. "You won't use it." The click of the hammer being pulled back answered him. She stepped down one stair, then another, the barrels aimed without wavering. "Try me." The men exchanged a glance, a silent decision passing between them. Without another word, they backed toward the open door, disappearing into the rain. The engine of the car roared to life moments later, its sound fading down. The lane. Clara's grip on the shotgun loosened only when she reached the bottom step. Daniel took it from her gently, setting it aside before her knees gave way, and she sank into the nearest chair. "They'll come back," she whispered. Daniel's gaze drifted to the darkness beyond the doorway. "Yes," he said, "but next time, we'll be ready." The storm hadn't let up. Rain drummed against the windows, the wind pressing cold fingers through the cracks in the old frame. Daniel closed and bolted the back door, the one the intruders had broken. The wood was splintered and the lock useless now, but at least it kept the night air out. Clara sat by the hearth, a wool blanket drawn tightly around her shoulders. The fire snapped and hissed as the damp logs burned, their heat failing to chase the tension from the room. Daniel poured her a cup of tea from the battered tin pot and set it down in front of her. She didn't drink. Her eyes were fixed on the flames, the orange light painting her face in shifting patterns. "Clara," he said quietly, "you need to tell me." She didn't look up. "You wouldn't believe me. I've just fought two strangers in my kitchen," Daniel replied, sitting opposite her. "Belief isn't the issue anymore. The truth is," the clock on the mantel ticked. Somewhere outside, a loose shutter banged in the wind. Finally, she lifted her gaze to meet his. "They weren't strangers," she said. "Not to me. I knew them once." Daniel waited, letting the silence draw the rest out. "They worked for my husband." The word husband landed between them like a dropped stone. Daniel's jaw tightened. Clara had worn no ring, spoken of no one waiting for her. "He's dead," she added quickly, as if reading his thoughts. "At least I thought he was. But if they're here." Her voice faltered. Daniel leaned forward. "Start from the beginning." Clara's hands twisted in the blanket. "I was married young, too young. He was older, charming at first. But underneath," she paused, eyes hardening. "Underneath, he was cruel. He kept things from me, illegal things. Men like those tonight. They weren't friends, they were tools. Weapons he used to get what he wanted." She looked away, the firelight catching on the sheen in her eyes. "One night, I overheard them talking about a deal, a shipment. I didn't understand all of it, but I knew it was dangerous. I made the mistake of asking him about it." Her voice dropped to almost a whisper. He didn't answer with words, just his fists. Daniel's hand tightened around the poker he'd set down earlier, but he said nothing. "I left that night," Clara continued, "ran with nothing but the clothes on my back and a little tin box I'd hidden away. I thought I was free. Then I heard a week later that he'd been killed in a warehouse fire." She gave a bitter laugh. "I believed it. I wanted to believe it." Daniel frowned. "And now, if those men are here, it means the fire didn't finish him, or it means someone else wants what I took." Her words caught Daniel's attention. "What did you take?" Clara hesitated. Then she reached into the folds of her blanket, drawing out a small, dented tin box, no bigger than a book. She placed it on the table between them. Daniel glanced from the box to her. "What's in it? You'll see." She flicked open the latch. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was a neat stack of old photographs and papers. Daniel picked one up, a black and white image of a man standing beside a lorry, its rear doors opened to reveal crates. The crates were stenciled with foreign markings. "These," Clara said, nodding to the photographs, "are proof. Proof of everything he was involved in: smuggling, bribery, worse. If the right people saw them, it would bring his whole world down." Daniel looked at the photographs again. And you've been carrying these ever since? She nodded. That's why they won't stop. They don't care about me. They care about keeping this hidden. And if he's alive, she swallowed, he'll want me dead before I can show anyone. The fire popped loudly, making them both jump slightly. Daniel set the photograph down carefully. Then we make sure these don't stay hidden. You're not running anymore, Clara. Not while you're under my roof. Her eyes searched his face, as if weighing whether to trust him entirely. Then, for the first time that night, she gave the smallest nod. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the broken doorframe. Somewhere far off, a car engine growled in the dark. Daniel stood, crossing to the window to look out into the blackness. They're not done with us yet, he said quietly. By morning, the rain had eased to a steady drizzle. Mist clung to the fields, turning the hedgerows into shifting shapes as Daniel's old Land Rover rattled down the narrow lane toward the village. Clara sat in the passenger seat, her hair pulled back, the tin box tucked deep inside her satchel. She hadn't slept much. Daniel could tell by the way she stared out at the gray landscape, her shoulders tense. You don't have to do this, he said, eyes on the road. Her voice was quiet but firm. Yes, I do. I've run far enough. If the constable sees these photographs, it's over. Daniel wasn't so sure. In his mind, small village police stations weren't built to deal with men like the ones who'd broken into his home last night. Still, he didn't argue. The village appeared ahead, a scattering of stone cottages, the church spire rising against the pale sky, smoke curling from chimneys. It looked peaceful, ordinary, but Daniel's gut told him it wasn't. He pulled up outside the post office, parking between a milk lorry and a battered blue van. Clara pulled her coat tighter before stepping out. The drizzle was cold and persistent, worming its way under collars and cuffs. Constable's office is just round the corner, Daniel said, locking the vehicle. We'll be quick. They walked a short cobbled lane in silence. The few villagers they passed offered polite nods, but Daniel caught the curious glances. Clara's presence had not gone unnoticed. In a place this small, nothing went unseen. The police station was small, its front desk manned by a man in his 50s with thinning hair and spectacles. Morning, he greeted. What can I do for you? Daniel stepped forward. We need to speak with Constable Harris, urgently. The man gave a slow nod, disappearing into the back. Moments later, Harris emerged, tall, broad-shouldered, with the easy calm of someone who'd seen most things a village could throw at him. Daniel wasted no time. It's about an attempted break-in at my place last night. 2 men, violent, and this. He motioned to Clara, who stepped forward and placed the tin box on the desk. Harris opened it, flipping through the photographs and papers. His eyes narrowed. This is serious. Clara nodded. I believe they're connected to my husband. I thought he was dead, but Harris raised a hand. Best not discuss details here. Let's step into my office. The 3 of them moved through to the back room where Harris closed the door and began asking questions. Clara explained everything: the marriage, the flight, the fire, the men who had found her again. When she finished, Harris leaned back in his chair, tapping a finger against the tin box. These men, I've heard whispers, smuggling routes along the coast. They've been clever about staying out of reach. He paused. But these photographs, they could change that. Relief flickered across Clara's face. Then the front door banged open. A voice called out, deep accented, with a rough edge Daniel recognized instantly. One of the men from last night. Daniel's eyes met Harris's. The constable moved quickly, pushing the tin box toward Daniel's back door. Now Clara didn't argue. She grabbed the satchel, and Daniel took her arm, leading her through a narrow corridor that opened onto a small yard. The drizzle had turned to rain again, cold and stinging. They made for the alley, boots splashing through puddles. Daniel didn't look back until they reached the Land Rover. That's when he saw him, a tall man in a dark coat stepping out of the police station's front door, scanning the street, like a predator scenting the air. Get in, Daniel said, starting the engine. The Land Rover roared to life, tires slipping slightly on the wet cobbles. Daniel pulled away just as the man spotted them. In the wing mirror, Daniel caught a glimpse. The man was already moving toward a black saloon parked by the curb. They're following, Clara said, voice tight. Daniel's jaw set. Then, we'd better lose them. He turned sharply onto the road out of the village, the Land Rover's engine straining as they climbed the hill. Behind them, the black saloon closed in, its headlights slicing through the rain. The chase had begun. The Land Rover rattled and groaned as Daniel pushed it harder than he usually dared. The old engine roared, tires spitting water as they climbed out of the village onto the narrow, twisting roads of the moors. Behind them, the black saloon clung close, headlights glaring through the curtain of rain. Whoever was driving knew these lanes well. They took the bends tight, never losing ground. Clara clutched the handle above the window, her other hand gripping the satchel pressed tight against her chest. Her knuckles were white, her face pale, but her eyes held steel. They won't stop, Daniel, she said over the engine's growl. Not until they have this, or me. Daniel glanced at her briefly, rain streaking across the windscreen. Then we make sure they get neither. The road narrowed, bordered by dry stone walls, slick with moss. Sheep scattered into the fields as the Land Rover thundered past. The saloon was gaining, its powerful engine outmatching Daniel's aging vehicle. "They'll ram us," Clara warned. "Not if I take us where they can't follow." He swung the wheel left, jolting them onto a smaller track barely more than 2 ruts carved into the sodden earth. Mud sprayed up the sides, the Land Rover shuddering as it bounced over rocks and dips. The saloon followed for a moment, tires sliding, headlights weaving, but the driver hesitated, the car fishtailing badly on the uneven ground. Finally, the saloon slowed, pulling back to the road, its lights shrinking into the mist. Clara exhaled sharply, her shoulders sagging with relief. "You did it." Daniel shook his head. "We bought time, that's all." The track wound higher into the moors, the rain easing to a mist that clung low to the ground. The sky was a flat sheet of gray, the horizon disappearing into it. Finally, Daniel pulled the Land Rover onto a patch of level ground beside the ruins of an old stone barn. He cut the engine, the sudden silence pressing heavy after the roar of the chase. Clara was still gripping the satchel. Daniel reached over gently, resting his hand on hers. "They won't find us here. Not right away." Her eyes met his, wide and searching. "You don't understand, Daniel. This doesn't end with hiding. He's alive. My husband, I know it now. That man at the station, he was one of his oldest men. If he's here, then he's here too." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then we finish this tonight." Clara shook her head, voice trembling. "You don't know what he's capable of. He'll use anyone, destroy anyone, just to keep hold of what's his." "I don't care who he is," Daniel said firmly. "No man hunts a woman like she's property. Not while I'm breathing." The words seemed to shake her more than comfort her. For a moment, silence stretched between them, broken only by the drip of water from the roof of the ruined barn. Then headlights cut through the mist. Clara stiffened. "They found us." Daniel grabbed the poker from the back seat, the same iron bar that had served him in the cottage out now. They scrambled into the barn, its roof half collapsed, its walls pitted with age. The ground was slick with mud and straw, the air damp and cold. Daniel guided Clara toward the far wall, where a gap in the stone opened to the moors beyond. "Go," he whispered. "I'm not leaving you, Clara." The crunch of boots silenced him. Shadows moved at the barn's mouth. 2 figures entered, silhouetted by the glare of headlights. One of them stepped forward, his voice unmistakable. "Well," the man drawled, "you've given us a lively chase." Daniel's grip tightened on the poker. Clara's breath caught, a sound halfway between terror and recognition. The man stepped further into the light. His face was leaner than the photographs, scarred now, but unmistakable. Her voice broke. "Edward, her husband, alive." He smiled, cold, sharp, and cruel. "Hello, Clara. Did you really think you could run from me forever?" Daniel shifted closer to her, placing himself between them. Edward's eyes flicked to him, then back to Clara. "Who's this?" he sneered. "A farmhand you picked up to keep your bed warm." Clara's hand reached for Daniel's arm, her grip trembling but sure. "He's the man who kept me alive when you tried to break me." Edward's smile faltered. His eyes darkened. "Then he'll die for it." The barn smelled of wet earth and old timber, the air thick with tension. Edward stepped closer, boots squelching in the mud. His eyes locked on Daniel. "Step aside," he said, his voice low. "Dangerous. She belongs to me." Daniel didn't move. The poker in his hand caught the faint glint of the headlights behind Edward. "She's not yours. Not anymore." Edward's smile was thin, more a baring of teeth than anything else. "Do you think you can stop me, boy? I've buried men braver than you." Clara's voice cut through the cold air. "Edward, stop this, please." But Edward's gaze was hard, unyielding. He motioned, and another shadow stepped into the barn. The man from the railway station, the one who had followed them. He carried a length of chain in one hand, its links rattling softly. Daniel's grip tightened on the poker. He knew the odds, 2 against 1, both of them dangerous, both of them willing to kill. But he also knew something else. He wasn't fighting for himself. Edward took another step. Last chance. Daniel didn't answer. Instead, he swung. The poker cracked against Edward's arm, sending him stumbling. The chain-wielding man lunged forward, but Daniel caught him in the ribs with the poker's blunt end, driving him back. Clara darted to the side, her satchel slipping from her grasp, spilling papers across the muddy floor. Edward's eyes flicked them, and that was his mistake. Daniel closed the distance, shoving him hard against the barn wall. Edward snarled, shoving back. The 2 men grappling in the half-light. The chain man recovered and moved in. But Clara was there, snatching up a broken beam from the floor and swinging with all her strength. The wood connected with his shoulder, sending him crashing into the wall. Edward broke free of Daniel's grip, pulling a knife from his coat. Its blade flashed in the dim light as he slashed. Daniel twisted, the knife grazing his side, pain burning hot. But Daniel didn't stop. He grabbed Edward's wrist, forcing it upward. The 2 men locked in a brutal, breathless struggle. The knife clattered to the ground, vanishing into the mud. Edward's strength was fading. The long chase, the years of arrogance, the certainty that no one could stand against him, all of it cracked now. Daniel shoved him hard, sending him stumbling backwards toward the gap in the barn wall. Edward's boot caught on the uneven stone. For a moment, he hung there, his balance gone, his face twisted with fury. Then he fell, tumbling down the slope. Outside, landing hard on the wet ground below. The chain man scrambled after him, dragging Edward to his feet. They limped into the mist, their figures swallowed by the pale light of the moor. Silence fell. Only the wind moved now, whispering through the gaps in the barn's broken roof. Daniel stood there, chest heaving, blood seeping through his shirt. Clara moved to him quickly, her hands gentle against his face. "You're hurt," she whispered. "I'm fine," he said, though his voice was rough. "Are you?" Her eyes shimmered in the faint dawn light. "I am now." They stood together for a moment, the world beyond the barn slowly brightening. The rain had stopped, replaced by the pale gold of early morning. In the distance, the moors stretched endless and wild, free. Clara bent to gather the scattered papers, but Daniel stopped her. "Leave them," he said softly. "Whatever they wanted from you, it doesn't matter anymore." She let them lie, watching them grow damp in the morning mist. Then she turned back to him. "You could have walked away," she said quietly. "But you didn't." Daniel met her gaze. "Some things are worth staying for." A slow smile touched her lips, the first real one he'd seen. She stepped closer, and for the first time since they'd met, she let her hand rest against his heart. The light grew stronger, spilling into the barn, painting them both in gold. Somewhere far off, a curlew called across the moors, its lonely cry fading into the morning. Edward was gone. The danger was over for now. And though they didn't yet know where the road ahead would take them, they knew they would walk it together. As the first full rays of sunlight broke over the hills, Clara's voice was barely more than a whisper. "Let's go home." Daniel nodded, his arm around her as they stepped out of the barn, leaving the shadows behind. The moors lay open before them, washed clean by the night's rain, stretching toward a future neither of them had dared to imagine.